This new race politics is so anti-democratic. You just look at New South Wales. Liberal government there is actually handing 10% of the country to people identifying as Aborigines. That's all the national parks, which will then be owned by Aborigines and co-managed by them and the government. And this is so anti-democratic because the 3% of New South Wales people who are Aboriginal will have the same say as the 97% who aren't over the national parks created for us all. But this is the co-management idea that's being pushed even harder in New Zealand by the woke Labor government of Jacinda Ardern. She's applying the same 50-50 management style, Maori and non-Maori, to New Zealand's water supplies. Now, I don't know why more people don't fight back against this racism, because it's so wrong. But one man who is former New Zealand Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who joins me now. Winston Peters, thanks for your time. You gave a powerful speech last Sunday, speaking truths that I dare say very few people would have the courage to do. And particularly you took on the guilt industry that spreads this falsehood that New Zealand and Australia too, really, it was like a Garden of Eden until the evil British colonisers came and brought death and destruction. Talk us through the point you were making.
Well, it's as though that everything that is recent or modern, or dare I say it, that everything that was part of colonialism was bad. And were it not for that, and if we had avoided that, we'd be living in modern Shangri-La in New Zealand. It's an awful fiction because, as you know, and those of us who've got Maori in our background know, Wilberforce in the UK was getting rid of slavery in 1832, and we had it still at the time of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. And then, of course, you had the slavery industry, where the first link in the chain in Africa was African leaders and kings and people in authority capturing their own people as the first link in the slavery chain. So what I'm really asking people to do is stop the so-called romanticizing of something that wasn't true and try and take the best parts of colonialism, and a lot of it wasn't good, but take the best parts and go forward. But if you think that what was happening in the Maori world, and I dare say it goes for other Indigenous cultures around the place, was perfect, then reflect on this. In the brief period leading up to the 1840 in New Zealand, over 20,000 Maori had been killed in fighting between themselves. And that's greater than any number in all wars since that time where the Maori are concerned. So I'm asking people to have a bit of honesty, a bit of truth. And if they do that, then we've got a far better chance of going forward as a united people, not playing the blame game, but seeking to ensure that it is unity that will be our strongest sort of foundation. And it's the only foundation we can have if you want to look at history worldwide.
And a lot of Australians wouldn't know, and increasingly I think a lot of young New Zealanders aren't taught, that in fact the warfare between the Maori tribes back in the early 1800s is actually critical to the story of why they agreed to Britain taking over in the first place in 1840 and putting themselves under British sovereignty.
Oh, that's entirely true. What you've got right now is a whole lot of sociological and historic revisionists who are trying to change the fact that everything was perfect. And if you had have not come here and we'd have got by, then somehow would have been, a sort of heaven on earth. Now, I'm not in any way saying anything other than my other part of my background, which happens to be Scots. And we know that the oppressor was then, and the Irish would argue the same. But it takes us nowhere if we are going to say that we were perfect and another part of our background was not, when it isn't remotely factual or true. But there are some people playing the guilt game because they're in the business of elitism, which is of no help to the ordinary person in our society, the ordinary European, the ordinary Maori, or the ordinary anybody in New Zealand, because their number one priorities, which are human and necessary, are overlooked for these cancellation programs that is beloved of too many people in the Western world today.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? This fighting over the past, when really the challenge for us is to make a better future, not try and revisit or reinvent the past. The latest polls, by the way, Winston Peters, shows the Nationals ahead of Ardern's Labor Party, with the Nationals partner, the ACT Party, third. Now, New Zealand's still a year and a half away from the next election. How much trouble is Jacinda Ardern in?
I think that the government's in serious trouble. The gloss has come off big time from 2020, where they said that they've done everything themselves, that's Labor, and got all the credit for it. And at the moment, things are finally poised, but I think there's going to be significant shifts going forward as well. The moral of the story, for anybody who's concerned about the shape and character and pathway down which New Zealand is going, is it's no time to sit on your laurels or sit on your fingers. It's now or never. Something has to happen, and they've got to do it in the next 12 months.
Winston Peters, looking back, Jacinda Ardern would not be the Prime Minister of New Zealand had you not, the election before last, agreed for your party to back her and put her over the line. Do you look back at that and regret it at all?
Look, you can have that view in your judgment, your decision-making. No, I don't, because it would be false to do that. What we did was to go into a changed arrangement where capitalism might regain its human face. We had serious unemployment, we had serious housing crisis, health crisis, you name it. The police were run down, the defence was run down. It was not anything like the National Party and ACT Party might claim now. But we set out to change that. We made some dramatic change. And we were a massive, engine room for good change. We got a serious turnaround in our frontline police, and the defence force became respectable amongst our allies in a whole lot, and foreign affairs was dramatically changed to our advantage. But they took all the credit for that and got all the victory at 2020 election, particularly with the lockdown and COVID and the so-called narrative about being kind and being careful. But we were also at the same time a massive handbrake. And this naked racism, this divisive separatism, which is so destructive of any society, was either was held back or kept secret from us. And that all the evidence is there for that, right? If we hadn't gone with them, you would have never heard of some of those people ever again in politics. But them's the breaks. And at this point in time, I can spend a lot of time trying to explain what we did unanimously as a party called New Zealand First, or get on with getting the future corrected, and that's what I intend to do, the latter.
Winston Peters, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.